Hello all, this is Dr. Dave Maslach talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3, and in this particular video I want to talk to you about what is the difference between a professor and a computer programmer. So if you don't know me, I'm an associate professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship. And I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There were so many people that helped me out that I wanted to pay the favor forward and help you out as much as I possibly can. All right, so what I'm talking about here with being a professor, it is somebody that's working at a university and they're on the tenure track, and a computer scientist or a computer programmer. I'm going to sort of group them all together: computer scientist, computer engineer, and a computer programmer. I'm sorry for those of you who are that know the differences between them, but I'm just going to sort of cluster them together and just talk about somebody that actually does programming for a living. I actually did that after my undergrad, or during my undergrad. I was an engineer, a chemical engineer, and now I'm a professor where I am in a business school or a college of business. And so I see the sort of wide range of things. And actually, a lot of my job is actually computer programming. We do a lot of that within a lot of different disciplines. It's funny when you talk to people that never thought that they'd be doing computer programming. When they went into grad school, they end up doing that anyways, because that's kind of what a lot of people do and a way a lot of knowledge is generated, right? So the problem with most knowledge, and this is a problem with sort of qualitative and quantitative analysis, if you know what those are. So qualitative is stuff that is not necessarily quantifiable, but quantitative, it is quantifiable. And a lot of things are shifting now towards where we can quantify things and make numbers out of different things, right? So if you think about the sort of large shifts with the internet, for example, large shifts with computing power, large shifts with anything to do with information computing technologies, it is really shifting that way. So that makes it that there's a tremendous amount of information available, and we have to analyze, not only sort of clean the data, make the data sort of presentable, and so you can actually look at it. If you didn't know this, most data in its raw form is really messy. It's really kind of dirty that you can't make sense of it, and you have to go through and sort of clean it. And then after that, you have to analyze that data and make sense of it by putting it all together in some sort of presentable way and look at the numbers behind that. So by doing that, often you have to resort to computer programming methods and building different tools and things like that you would be able to analyze the data, whatever you're looking at, whatever field that you're in. It's definitely becoming a lot more sort of quant heavy with some of these things. Now, I know lots of people are not doing that, and they don't have to when you go into graduate school, and that is fine. But in every field, it doesn't matter what sort of, soft the field or how soft the field is, as you might consider, it doesn't matter at this moment. It is all going sort of more quanty and definitely moving that way. There's lots of people that are doing that kind of stuff in every single field that's out there. And even if you're doing literature, for example, you might want to analyze all of the information that has happened in the past, and you have to do computer programming to look at that kind of stuff. And there's being large labs that are growing very quickly in terms of analyzing this stuff. And the larger universities, the sort of major players, are going that way in terms of research, where they're looking at sort of more quant heavy. And, if you can sort of do that, the two things together, it sort of really helps out. So going back to the question, what is the difference between computer programmers and professors? There's a tremendous amount of similarity between them. Actually, as I mentioned, I thought I would be not doing that when I was becoming a professor. Actually, I wanted to leverage some of that stuff when I went into graduate school and was going to become a professor. And I've been able to do that. And I spend a significant amount of time looking at code and going through sort of different amounts of code and sort of analyzing, mostly kind of scripting stuff, not necessarily going into real details, sort of making a large computer software. That's actually what I'm doing with the Reciprocity project, but I'm not doing that. I've actually got computer programmers that are doing that for me. So if you check that website, that's where I'm actually building that out. It's just easier for me to do that and sort of prioritize my resources. professors have to focus on developing ideas much more than actually going and doing a lot of this sort of analytical work. We've learned how to do that, but then we sort of move on to developing the ideas behind that. And that's where we kind of go with it. A lot of time with these fields, both of them, you're going to spend a lot of your career writing different various kinds of computer programs or simple things. Most of the stuff that professors are going to work on are going to be kind of like little short, quick things. Some professors in some fields are doing really, really massive programs, right? Like absolutely huge programs that will require supercomputers that are linked across different universities, and that's kind of a subfield, right? Sort of scientific computing, which I did years ago. But that is kind of one domain, but a lot of people are actually going towards writing these sort of simple little programs where they can sort of analyze something. And then so you spend a lot of your time in both fields debugging your ideas that you have, right? So both of them, you're going to have really great ideas. I'm not that good of a computer programmer. I know a lot of people are better computer programmers than me. And so I spend a lot of time debugging, but I think that's kind of the norm anyways for most people. And I've worked on various sort of sizes of computer programs and things like that, from hundreds of thousands of lines of code to, something that is 10 lines of code. You spend a lot of time going through and debugging all of this stuff. It's kind of the norm, right? The other thing, you're going to spend a lot of time documenting what you did. And the reason is you forget so much all the time. So you got to get in the practice of doing that. Whether you're an academic or whether you're a computer programmer, you just have to document a lot. And you'll spend more of your time doing that than you actually do of actually real research or real sort of programming, right? As you can imagine. And coming back to that, you often forget about what you did, and you have to continuously be relearning whatever you did, right? So code I wrote 5 years ago, I got to go back and say, oh, what did I do there? What was going on there? And I have to sort of think about it again. And so you spend a lot of your time looking at a screen and analyzing stuff on a screen in both careers. That's totally normal. Now, what are the differences between professors and computer programmers? You're going to, as a computer programmer, you're probably going to be working, so there's kind of two types. There's the type that works in a large team and working on really sort of big computer program, right? So this is a real large software company, Google, for example. So I'm working for Google. The other thing is you could be freelancers, and there's a tremendous amount of freelancers that are sort of serving smaller niches that are out there, that you sort of serve them, right? So it's going to be small businesses and stuff like that. That is actually really common at this moment, where there's a lot of freelancers that are doing that. And you might call yourself a freelancer, but most people will call themselves some sort of consultant, right? So whereas a professor is going to be working in a university, usually it could be with a collaboration with a couple of other colleagues, could be, maybe it's 2 colleagues, maybe it's 10 colleagues, and you're working together towards this particular thing. But generally, it is pretty collaborative, and it's the effort of getting that knowledge out into the world, right? So a lot of times as a professor, you work even though you're working in a collaborative sense, so this is the second thing, you're working on your own. You're working at a desk, working by yourself at home, for example, whereas a computer programmer tends to have a lot more of a collaborative atmosphere, where you're working in maybe a bullpen or something like that, where there's many people together and you all go out for lunch and all those kind of things. So it's definitely a different atmosphere at a university, where it's sort of more studious than it is in kind of a bullpen or something like that you'd work with a computer programming sort of area. Now, the other thing that you're going to notice is that sort of a university professor is you spend probably more time kind of hacking code, because you're writing ideas and your goal is to write things. And so you spend a lot more time doing kind of one-off stuff. I've really noticed that and you talked about other people that have done computer programming before. When they become a professor, they do a lot more kind of one-off kind of hacky things. So it's not about the elegance, unless you're in computer science, professor in computer science, where you might be working on algorithms or something like that. But it is less about the elegance and more about showing something and then going through and presenting that particular thing. So some of the code that we do is pretty hacky. It's not, not very efficient in any sort of way, but it sort of shows the result that we want to do, so we can actually talk about that and present it in a much more better way. There's way better ways to do a lot of the stuff that we do. It's just that, that is not what we're focused on in terms of what the ultimate goal is. Now, if you're working on a large computer, a large thing where you need a supercomputer and stuff like that, then people are going to really focus on algorithms and really get efficiency of the code really working well as a professor, where you really, really focused on that. But for the most part, most of us don't do that. And it's just because, we're doing a lot more one-off things than we are in terms of building this sort of massive data set or massive sort of code bank, right, where you're always calling on the same thing. And in terms of a professor, there's less of a nerd culture. For sure, I've noticed this, particularly in business schools, in a lot more of a competitive culture where you're competing against other people and other professors that are out there. It is really, really competitive compared to kind of like the standard computer programming kind of job that you're going to get, where you are working collaboratively on a project and working towards an ultimate goal, right? So that's the key thing to think about. All right, so if you like this video, I told you what's the difference between, I defined what a professor and a computer programmer is, and then told you what some of the differences and similarities of them between a professor and a computer programmer. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.